In the vast landscape of modern intellectual giants, few figures have left a mark as deep and as lasting as Noam Chomsky. A linguist, philosopher, political activist, and critic of power, Chomsky's name is synonymous with challenging authority and uncovering uncomfortable truths about the way our societies are shaped. His life's work spans more than 7 decades, crossing disciplines from the structure of human language to the hidden mechanisms of political manipulation. To speak about Chomsky is to enter a world where words are not just tools for communication, but instruments of power, a world where ideas, not weapons, have the potential to liberate or control entire populations. Born in 1928 in Philadelphia to a family of Jewish immigrants, Chomsky's early life was steeped in books, ideas, and the struggles of working-class communities during the Great Depression. His father, a Hebrew scholar, and his mother, an activist in education and community affairs, exposed young Noam to language, literature, and the questions of justice that would define his career. From a young age, Chomsky displayed a restless curiosity, reading newspapers with skepticism and asking why the world was divided between those who held power and those who bore its weight. By the age of 10, he was writing essays on the rise of fascism in Europe, an extraordinary glimpse into a mind already tuned to the dynamics of power and propaganda. Chomsky's early intellectual path led him to the study of language. At a time when most linguists focused on cataloging words or describing how people happen to speak, Chomsky asked a deeper question: what makes human language possible in the first place? His answer revolutionized the field. He proposed that the ability to use language is not merely learned from the environment but is innate to the human mind, hardwired into our very biology. This idea, known as the theory of a universal grammar, challenged prevailing notions and reshaped linguistics, cognitive science, and even philosophy. To Chomsky, language was not just a social convention, it was an expression of the human capacity to think, to reason, and to create meaning. Yet, while Chomsky's academic work earned him global acclaim, it was his political writings that made him a household name beyond universities. Living through the Vietnam War era, he was horrified by the way governments justified violence abroad and disguised their motives at home. Chomsky began to analyze not just the actions of governments, but the language they used to persuade citizens to accept or ignore those actions. He saw that the words of leaders, amplified by compliant media, could frame wars as humanitarian interventions, label dissenters as traitors, and present oppression as peacekeeping. This realization became the foundation of his lifelong critique of power and propaganda. One of Chomsky's most influential insights came in the book he co-authored with Edward S. Herman, Manufacturing Consent, The Political Economy of the Mass Media, published in 1988. In it, they argued that the mass media in democratic societies often served the interests of powerful elites rather than the public. According to their propaganda model, media outlets, though appearing free and independent, filter the news in ways that favor corporate and governmental agendas. Ownership structures, advertising revenue, reliance on official sources, and ideological pressures create a system where dissenting voices are marginalized, inconvenient truths are downplayed, and narratives that justify the status quo dominate the headlines. In short, the media do not simply inform, they shape perceptions, guiding what people believe to be reality. Chomsky's analysis of propaganda goes beyond obvious censorship or authoritarian control. He emphasizes that the most effective propaganda in free societies works not by silencing voices outright but by framing debate so narrowly that the boundaries of acceptable opinion are already predetermined. People believe they are engaging in free discussion, yet the questions they are asking and the perspectives they consider have been subtly set by the powerful. This understanding of manufactured consent remains profoundly relevant in the age of social media, where algorithms amplify certain messages and suppress others, often without users realizing how their views are being steered. Throughout his political writings, Chomsky has been consistent in his moral stance. He opposes the abuse of power, whether by governments, corporations, or media conglomerates. He often reminds us that ordinary citizens, not elites, are the true bearers of democratic responsibility. For him, questioning authority is not an act of rebellion but a civic duty. This belief has made him a persistent critic of U.S. foreign policy, corporate greed, economic inequality, and environmental destruction. At the same time, his unwavering commitment to evidence, rationality, and ethical principles has earned him both admiration and fierce opposition. Chomsky's work also sheds light on the psychological dimensions of propaganda. He observes that power does not merely rely on coercion but often on manufacturing fear and shaping desires. By controlling narratives, who is presented as a threat, what is portrayed as progress, which sacrifices are deemed necessary. Powerful institutions can secure public compliance even when their actions conflict with the people's actual interests. In this way, propaganda functions less like a blunt instrument and more like a subtle fog, obscuring the reality behind slogans and headlines. Despite his critiques, Chomsky remains cautiously hopeful about humanity's potential for change. He insists that knowledge is a form of power, that understanding the mechanisms of propaganda is the first step toward resisting it. His vision is not utopian but pragmatic. If individuals learn to question the language of power, demand accountability from leaders, and support grassroots movements, genuine democracy and justice become possible. His speeches often end not with despair but with a call to action, to think critically, to organize collectively, and to believe that small acts of resistance can shift the tide of history. In examining Chomsky's legacy, it is impossible to separate the scholar of language from the critic of politics. For him, both realms are bound by the same truth: language is not neutral. The words we use shape the world we see and the choices we make. Whether in describing the syntax of a sentence or the rhetoric of a war speech, Chomsky reveals how language both reflects and constructs reality. His work reminds us that clarity in thought and expression is essential to freedom, that without the ability to speak and think independently, societies become vulnerable to manipulation. Today, as we navigate an era defined by misinformation, digital echo chambers, and increasing distrust in institutions, Chomsky's warnings feel more urgent than ever. His insights challenge us to look beyond headlines, to question the stories we are told, and to recognize that the machinery of propaganda has simply evolved with new technologies. Yet the core struggle remains the same: who controls the narrative, and to what end? In the end, Noam Chomsky's life and work offer a profound lesson that the defense of truth and freedom begins with our words, our questions, and our refusal to accept easy answers from those in power. His journey from a curious boy reading about fascism to one of the most cited scholars in history is a testament to the power of intellectual courage. Chomsky shows us that even in a world where propaganda is sophisticated and pervasive, critical thinking remains our strongest tool of resistance. If there is one takeaway from Chomsky's decades of writing and activism, it is this: language can either liberate us or imprison us. To be free, we must understand how it works, how it can be twisted, and how it can also be reclaimed to speak truth to power. This message, as urgent today as it was in the 1960s or during the Vietnam War, challenges each of us to see beyond appearances, to ask who benefits from the stories we hear, and to have the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. Noam Chomsky's voice continues to resonate because he speaks to the fundamental tension in all societies, the tension between power and the people's right to know. His legacy urges us to stay vigilant, to think critically, and to remember that democracy is not a gift handed down by leaders but a living practice sustained by informed citizens. In a world where words can be weapons, he reminds us that they can also be shields, protecting human dignity, exposing injustice, and guiding us toward a more honest and humane future.